In Black Ops 1, there's a mission where you break out of a prison camp with Reznov, and you're playing as Mason.
Reznov. Every journey begins with a single step. This is step one!
And that's always been my favorite mission, probably out of any of the COD games, but did you know that it happened in real life? Before I get too deep in, I have to break the bad news and answer the first question that I had, and I'm sure that you had. Mason and Victor were not real. There is no one to compare them to in real life. They did not exist. They are works of fiction, as cool as they are. But I sincerely apologize for the heartbreak, and I know it might have been a little misleading with the thumbnail. Yeah, today I want to talk about the real escape from Vorkuta, or what I should call the Vorkuta uprising, because no one actually escaped, and the true story is much more tragic than the COD version. Just as a heads up, this is going to contain a lot of violence, so if you can't handle that, please leave. You've been warned. It all begins July 19th in 1953. Inmates almost solely consisted of political prisoners working the camp's coal mines. 62,000 people are housed here. They're forced to work until the capture of Lavrenti Beria in Moscow. I probably butchered that name. And then the arrival of Ukrainian prisoners. Also, on a side note, that Lavrenti Beria guy, again, I don't know how to say that name. He was a fucking monster. When I was looking this up, I was researching him, and I am not including his crimes in here, but he was a horrible person. Anyways, the camp was laid out into 17 different sections of labor forces, building coal mines and other such things, until the uprising begins. When the uprising begins, it starts in just one of the 17 sections, but rapidly spreads to 5 other. However, unlike in the mission in Black Ops, the uprising starts as a passive protest. The prisoners refuse to work the mines, with their demands being to give the inmates access to a state of attorney and do justice. In short time, the prisoners' demands would change to be more political, but I couldn't find much information on what those demands were. 1 week after the inmates' strike at the camp administration didn't do much of anything. They increased security around the perimeter, but there wasn't any immediate action taken against the inmates, as it was passive, so they didn't use any force to try to make them work. The inmates' demands were actually met when the mines were visited by the state attorney of the USSR, Roman Rudenko, internal troops commander Ivan Maslenikov, I hope I'm saying that right, and some other fancy political people from Moscow came down too. The generals spoke to the inmates peacefully. However, on July 26th, a mob of prisoners stormed the maximum security punitive compound and released 77 inmates. All of those generals and the fancy state attorneys that I talked about ended up staying after this happened so that they could plan their response. And unfortunately, for all of the prisoners held there, on July 31st, the camp chief started a mass arrest of all of the camp's saboteurs, and inmates responded with barricades blocking themselves off in sections of the camp. The next day of August 1st, the camp's chief ordered direct fire at a mob of prisoners, killing 42 on the spot while injuring 135 who likely succumbed to their injuries at a later date. They had been deprived of medical help, so there was really no surviving the injuries. After this attack, the mob surrendered and the saboteurs were held in a maximum security section of the camp. The overall outcome of the Vorkuta uprising was horrific. Afterwards, the conditions were marginally improved, but the blood had been spilled by then, so the real Vorkuta uprising was a stark contrast to its Call of Duty counterpart. Now, while I'm always going to love this mission, I have to admit when I first started researching this, I was really bummed out to read that it was just a massacre. However, I do think it's important to acknowledge that popular media tends to misconstrue war and other things of its nature. I think we're all too often fed a fake image of valor and glory and heroes in these historic battles, when in reality there really isn't any. War just kind of ends up being a waste of life, and the real life Victor Reznovs and Alex Masons are just nameless soldiers. Anyways, I appreciate you watching, and if you hadn't played Black Ops 1 by now, I don't know how you could have gotten away with that, but you really need to. Black Ops 1 is the best Black Ops, and there's no other answer, so you're wrong if you think otherwise. Alright, I'll see you guys later.